Yovani Palace is the last official residence of the monarchs of the Kingdom of Hawaii. We guide our visitors around the palace as King Kalakaua would have after the palace was finished. King Kalakaua had the palace built as a message to the world that we were a strong, independent nation that could deal diplomatically and economically with nations around the world. Kalakaua loved to entertain in the dining room. If you had arrived in Hawaii, you would have been expected to call on the king, especially if you were any kind of important person. Kalakaua liked to sit in the middle of the dining table because that let him converse with all of his guests so he could get to know them better. Liliuokalani wanted a new constitution. She was introducing it at the request of her people. A group of 13 local businessmen who felt their interests were being threatened by that constitution banded together and deposed the queen. She was imprisoned in Iolani Palace for a period of a little under 8 months. While there, she was allowed no writing materials initially. She began the quilt to speak to the future with thread and fabric about who she was and what had happened to her. Our basement galleries contain artifacts, items used and worn by members of the royal family. What we hope a lot of our visitors go away with is how Hawaii's 19th century history as an independent nation affects Hawaii today. It is the only official residence of royalty you'll be able to visit in the United States.
Mission Houses Museum is one of the most important places to learn about 19th century Hawaii. The changes that came about after Captain Cook were immense. We have more Hawaiian language books than any other library in the world, and we have many of the original letters and journals of the missionaries beginning in the 1820s, and those documents really form a corpus of information that you can't find anyplace else. The missionaries came in 1820, just a year after Kamehameha had died and the Kapu system had been overturned. This is a place where the royalty hung out a lot. They were really fascinated with the story of Christianity that the missionaries had to tell, but they were also fascinated by missionary dress, they were fascinated by missionary food, everything about Western life they were fascinated by. And so they came here to learn those sorts of things. In order for them to teach Christianity, the missionaries had to first create a written language, because according to the missionaries, you had to be able to read the Word of God in order to become a Christian. And so the only way to do that was to read the Bible. So we have a reproduction of the printing press that began the whole history of printing in the Hawaiian Islands. This quaint little press revolutionized Hawaii, really. By 1853, 75% of all Hawaiians could read and write. It was the second most literate nation in the world next to Scotland. The mission house of 1821 tells the story of the missionaries living together sort of in a communal way in the first few years that they lived here. They had a common table where all the families sat at. They came as a community that shared everything. They didn't own anything privately, they owned everything in common. This is such an important place in Hawaii. You really can't understand today's Hawaii without coming here and really understanding the role of the missionaries. So this is where you can come and learn that story. We have tours on the hour beginning at 11 o'clock and ending at 3 o'clock.
Bishop Museum is Hawaii's oldest and largest museum, and it is a very comprehensive collection of both cultural material, meaning relating to human cultures, as well as natural history. The Bishop Museum campus has a variety of buildings, both old and new. There are the historic older buildings, the Hawaiian Hall complex, and that includes Hawaiian Hall, Polynesian Hall. Then there's the planetarium. It's really an outstanding planetarium for the Pacific. And finally, there's the Science Adventure Center, which is aimed at natural sciences, and particularly for the Hawaiian culture. There are many connections to the plants and animals and the natural environment, and that comes out in the Science Adventure Center as well. Hawaiian Hall is the largest exhibit space in Bishop Museum. So what visitors see is a very broad overview of Hawaiian culture, going back to its mythical beginnings, and then finally ending on the third floor with a historical overview of what happened after Western contact, coming up to pretty much around the present day. There's so much wonderful stuff to see and read about and listen to. It's so rich, it's so detailed. A great many people have written in our visitor comment book what a tremendous experience it has been to take the trip from Waikiki to come to Bishop Museum. They really do have a good time. It's all exciting to me.
The Honolulu Academy of Arts is the premier visual arts museum of Hawaii. This building was opened in 1927. The building echoes Hawaii's place in the Pacific, and the galleries are arranged around a series of courtyards. We have the Chinese courtyard, and around the Chinese courtyard are the Asian art galleries, and then we have the Mediterranean courtyard, and around that courtyard are the European and American art galleries. We always have at least 5 exhibitions going on. It's a great place for visitors to come because they can see art of Hawaii, art by Hawaii artists. There are internationally recognized masterpieces here by Van Gogh, Matisse, Monet. We have artwork from Picasso to Masami Teraoka, who's probably Hawaii's best-known resident artist. It's a total overview of all the exciting trends in art from the 20th century. Artists and museum professionals have come here and just been awed by what they find here in the middle of the Pacific. We're very accessible to Waikiki. The public bus and the Waikiki trolley both stop right in front of the museum. We are open Tuesday to Saturday, 10 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. and Sunday 1 to 5 p.m. and admission for the general public is $10.